Hello and welcome to Insight, everyone. I'm Nnamdi Odipo. I will, on this episode, pursue robust conversations on three germane issues. First, we would explore how the state should be able to harness the advantage of grid decentralization to light up the nation, but then our regulatory hurdles and infrastructure gaps continue to dim the light. Next in our lineup is this weekend's Ondo governorship election. With just a few days until Saturday, November 16, what are the key issues that will shape the fate of the state and its voters? And then Elizabeth Omori will continue from where she left off last week on revitalizing the reading culture in Nigeria. Let's kickstart the conversations.
Whatever the issues are,
the National Assembly is constitutionally empowered to scrutinize,
however complex or intricate.
We have involved all the academia, the members of the academia. We have involved the academies.
Be it government policies or in fact any issue of public concern.
Our job is to help you gain clarity and make sense of it all.
This is not really healthy for our democracy.
There's a lot of aggrievance in terms of who has been in power longest and who becomes the governor of the state.
It's also in the quality of food being consumed.
After all, perception is insight.
And gaining understanding is also getting insight.
The signing of the Electricity Act 2023 into law and subsequent implementation is considered a monumental event in the evolution of Nigeria's power sector. As a measure of decentralizing dependency on the national grid, states are expected to have a framework for the development of their respective state electricity markets in order to attract the investment required to generate and distribute sustainable and reliable electricity within their domain. But why isn't grid decentralization, the magic wand? At least not so far. Let's see how we can gain some important insight on this matter from my guest, Kunle Kola Olubiyo, a power sector analyst and president, Nigeria Consumer Protection Network. Thank you and welcome to the program. Mr. Kunle, welcome to the program.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Very well. Nice to have you here. Despite our best efforts, it would appear or it would seem that Nigeria has continued to experience frequent national grid collapses. And for as long as I can remember, these issues of availability, reliability, and affordability have been dominant, in public discourse. Do you strongly believe that the Electricity Act 2023 is the biggest opportunity to resolve Nigeria's electricity problem, at least on a state-by-state basis? And forgive me, but haven't we experienced enough to know that it really isn't that simple?
Thank you very much. I seem not to get your definition of simplicity or simple that you have used contextually. But if I may align with the drafter or those who crafted the Electricity Act, I want to believe that to an average Nigerian, the coming to be of the Electricity Act is a game changer, the new normal and the way to go. Ideally, that the presidential system of government to some extent gives some level of freedom, leverage, and autonomy to the subnational. That is where we copied it from that in the US. And so here in Nigeria, we decided to repackage the definition of presidential system of government haphazardly. And now we are on the right track by making sure that electricity, which is a major economic component that used to be on the exclusively of the legislation, now the past administration under the same APC has helped in bringing it back on track, is now under the concurrent list. That is the grand norm that gives support to the Electricity Act. So Electricity Act is just on the same page with what the last APC-led administration did. And now coming down to the subnational, I recall that in 2012, 2013 to 2015, a lot of Nigeria embarked on, government is continuum. Yes. And so the federal government embarked on road work. went around the world to convince investors to come and put their investments in renewable energy off-grid, which could be island, model, embedded, or sector-specific generation. We got about 15 investors, big names, who came to Nigeria. They were in Nigeria for about 3 to 5 years, and they were ready to invest in the renewable energy subsector through different energy mix. But the major problem was in the issue of the pricing of the renewable energy. We gave them bogus figure that we say is going to be the tariff rate, and they were expecting us to provide then put call option agreement, PCOA, and partial risk guarantee. And these are the prerequisites that is required in investment of this magnitude, which is usually backed by African Development Bank or the World Bank. So a lot of them were around, like I said, but we could not take advantage of that. What we had in mind as a nation then was to create an energy glut. You know, if we have excess generation, because the UN benchmarks entails that 1,000 megawatts to 1 million population. And if you look at what we are getting on grid that has remained unstable, we have an average of 3,500 to a peak generation evacuation and distribution of 5,600 to 5,800 megawatts. And if you benchmark me, that means that only 5.8 million people on the average in Nigeria by global context has access to energy. If you benchmark 5.8 million population to 220 million, is the highest level of energy poverty, and it's not going to take any nation like that.
And also, IS, one of the lowest in terms of consumption per capita. If you,
I'm saying energy poverty per capita. It just depends on the.
I get that. And since we're on the issue of the challenge and the problem, because I know that over the years we've done some work in this area in terms of reforming the sector. Before, of course, I know you've hinted at the prospect already, and we'll still come to that. Why do we often find ourselves, in the thick, the middle of these arguments that Nigeria's transition, seems to have been just the transition from the vertically integrated, publicly owned electricity network to a largely privately owned, unbundled electricity network is simply not working. I mean, yes, there are arguments for and against, but is there any credence to the argument that we may just have achieved only structural transformation in the power sector over the years? And let me just ask you a direct question. Why is it increasingly difficult to sustain technical transformation since the unbundling of NEPA?
Well, whether technically used, I've never attended any interview and tell the moderator interview that there's no area or restricted area as far as the power sector is concerned. So what you have said in context are clearly understood. I don't think the privatization of the power sector has failed in its entirety or in its in practical sense of it. What has really failed is the fact that before the passage of passing of assent to the Electricity Act, the Electric Power Sector Reform Act of 2005, we waited too long to pass the Electricity Act. It was just strictly a sector reform act, and reform by its nature was not designed to operationalize the day-to-day business of power generation, transmission, and distribution. So the gestation period with which we allow ourselves to wait gave rise to a lot of gaps in regulatory, institutional, and legal framework, which are the gaps that have been identified. Now, the Nigerian Electricity Regulatory Commission has more power and has, in the practical sense of it, after the passage of Electricity Act, to bite. Before, it was a regulatory institution that was inhibited by a lot of unenvisaged dynamics that emerged post-privatization that have been adequately addressed. If you even notice that Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu, our beloved president, when he came to power, he still he still instigated the amendment, slight amendment of the Electricity Act to reflect the dynamics and the emerging trend in the power sector. So the bulk is now in the court of the state government. Like Ekiti state government over the weekend granted 4 licenses to generation companies and distribution company within the subnational. What the state is expected to do is not to provide the funds or use scarce resources in the state, but to create the enabling environment. The states are expected to create their own subnational regulatory institution and address issues that borders on, or taking a note from the experience or the gains of the federal institution, that's NEC. The state government have been brought together by regulatory institutions, the NEC, with conjunction with NEMSA, to compare notes. And so in comparing notes now, the states are expected to domesticate the Electricity Act and provide land as their own equity, at least make land available for investors who might be interested in investing in the state, and provide the security. And as it's well, the Federal Ministry of Finance, in its traditional responsibility, we still have to, because if you are getting facility to invest in Nigeria, when you go to IMF, World Bank, IFC, or African Development Bank, or Chinese Exim Bank, there is no distinction or difference between the state and Nigeria. So each state that want to draw, money, because you have what they call the FAC, the Federation Allocation Account. So the state, the federal government, through the Ministry of Finance, is usually expected to provide sovereign guarantee or bankable financial instrument that is acceptable globally. So, and before that is done, the Ministry of Finance will what we call interrogate the to make sure there are no other clauses or there are no part of the MOU agreement or legal instrument that may be, inconsistent with our national objective, or like you have the PID and what have you. So once that is done, the state, that's where the federal government will come in to complement the essence, desire of the state as a federation. Once we get the financial instrument, you see, there's no way with our experience on the national grid that we can continue to run on a radial system that is monolithic. A situation where you have great challenges in one part of the country and the whole country, like you see what happened in northern Nigeria. You've seen the Ogwaji, Makurdi, Northern Corridor. The vegetation encroachment on the grid pull out the conductors. And the whole of northern region were out of supply for about 2 weeks. And simultaneously, they did that along the Kanji-Jeba corridor, where there was vandalization of the towers. So the grid, Mr. President and the Vice President, as you are aware, they put their name on the ballot boxes, and they made some commitment to Nigerians to deliver. And so Mr. President, with what he has been doing, has been working closely with the state government, and want to appreciate that. So we need to do more to make sure that the grids are decentralized for energy security purposes. And
I wanted you to also comment on this whole issue of grid integration. You made allusions to newer and cleaner sources. There's solar, there's wind, and how to integrate them into the national grid. Even so, we know that that some of these sources are already decentralized. I wanted you to comment on that. But earlier on you talked about in talking about the prospects, you alluded to some of the subsisting challenges or challenges that have reared their head. I remember you talking about the issue of pricing when an interested party wanted or came into the country. I reckon that with grid decentralization comes its own share of challenges as well. Issues like you alluded to already, issues like a source of power for the state subsidiaries, for instance, as well as pricing and maybe tax cost considerations. Don't we have options within the Electricity Act to mitigate some of these subsisting challenges, or would you recommend perhaps some form of changes to the current framework, capable of giving the sector opportunity to grow and develop sustainably?
Well, we are calling for flexibility and dynamism on the part of Federal Inland Revenue Services, FRSC, and the customs. The major problem we have as per inflow of investment or scaling up investment in the country is a perception of customs trying to stick to their ground and say, look, they have revenue targets for the year and they must stick to it. In a period like this, in a period of national emergency, when we are trying to drive reindustrialization and growth, there's more than ever before the need to provide fiscal and non-fiscal incentive like tax holidays to prospective investors. It's like you're a man, let me put it in a lighter mode. If you want to marry a woman, you are courting her, you buy her pizza, you buy her chocolate, you buy her ice cream, and of course you are wooing her. That's the same way you woo investors.
And you're also at your best behavior.
Your best behavior. That is when it is only when she now profile you and feel, oh, this man is fit for purpose. So after marriage, then you now say, look, come, you might have to manage Agbado and Gari and what have you. So, but if you want to woo investors, what we need now is to first of all attain the level of energy security, because there's a huge deficit, and electricity is the life wire of any nation. And if you look at it as we speak to you now, because of the frequency of line trippings on the national grid and system collapses, a lot of manufacturers are going off the grid and using embedded generation like alternative sources like generator, which is not the renewable or energy mix sources, is making Nigeria products coming from Nigeria. You recall that we've signed into African Free Continental Trade Agreement. It's making our product to be highly priced and not competitive. And so for us to address the issue of global competitiveness, we need to get it right with energy security. And so there's nothing too much that we can give. So we are appealing to the Nigerian customs and Federal Inland Revenue Services to work closely with the coordinating Minister of Finance in policy direction to make sure that within 6 months and 1 year, because of the multiplier effects that comes with electricity, job creation, even the issue of youth restlessness or insurgency, once we can create the necessary absorptive capacity to create job, create wealth and employment, of course, which comes with electricity, of course, a lot of things will be addressed, which will not necessarily have to be driven by federal government.
Very well then, Kunle, Kola, Olubiyo, power sector analyst and President, Nigerian Consumer Protection Network. I'd like to thank you so much for coming on the program.
It's my pleasure being with the largest TV station in Africa. Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming.